I started to realize that what was drawing people the most to me, what people were really interested in hearing from me, were the things that made me different, were the things that actually made me insecure, and things that I had to take the time to deal with. Because during COVID, I really dived into a lot of insecurities I had around my body image. I am not your average looking yoga teacher. Unfortunately, in yoga, there's a very specific body type that tends to be pushed forward, but I'm a larger girl. And I have students come up to me all the time and say that they're so happy to see someone who looks more like them, or just someone who looks different.
Oh my gosh, you guys, today's guest, Taylor Lorenz, I am so excited to have her on the show because this episode is going to be all about what you do when your dream life stops feeling like a dream. Taylor was living like the ultimate traveler's fantasy. Like we think about those like nomadic lifestyles. She was jet setting around the world as a full-time travel blogger, and she was just making gobs and gobs of money, I guess. Like you were just like you had an income that a lot of people would envy. But you fell out of your love with your job just as you were starting to pivot, COVID hit and slashed your income by over 90%, almost like quite literally we can say overnight, because I don't know when things shut down in Canada, but in the United States, it was on March 15th. I remember that so distinctly. Was it about the same timing? Probably earlier. Canada's probably a little earlier, I bet. I just feel like that. Anyways, determined to get her footing, she rebuilt her blog with a new focus on yoga, which I cannot wait to talk about, only to face yet another curveball when Google's algorithm, we call it the black box in marketing, wiped out her income again. And if you're relying on paid search and things like that too, they can change their algorithm and overnight you can just lose all your rankings. So I totally get that. That's when that happens. And they do it to keep the playing field level, but blah, blah, blah. It's still horrible when it happens. Through all of this, thank God you're a yogi, Taylor has learned to let go of control, embrace acceptance, and find peace in uncertainty. And I sure know what certain uncertainty looks like. It's just called life. Now she's thriving as a full-time yoga teacher and new yoga teacher mentor, helping others chase their dreams with confidence and grace. Oh, and a fun fact, she also went to film school and thought she'd be a producer before she started pivoting to travel and yoga. So Taylor, welcome to Curveball. Thank you so much for jumping into the deep end with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Oh my gosh. So look at how amazing her energy is. I just love this. So tell me what it was like when you were falling out of love with what was your dream job. So it started off great, but after a while, it was not as dreamy as you thought. So what does that feel like? And then how do you find the courage to even pivot to something new? Because you had all the good things. I mean, we know COVID obviously was like a big thing, but you were sort of falling out of love with it. And COVID was like, oh no, we're for sure we're going to take this away from you. So tell me what was going on and what that was like.
Yeah, sometimes we have life lessons that are hitting us pretty like squarely, like right in front of our face, and we just don't notice, and we need something to hit a little bit harder. That is what happened to me with COVID. And I think for a lot of people as well. There were lots of little hints that were happening along the way, but for like a long time, I really did enjoy my lifestyle of traveling around the world. I was a budget backpacker. I was very comfortable with the money that I was making, but I was moving places every 2 to 3 nights. I was staying in hostels. I was always sleeping next to strangers in the bunk next door or like above me. Like it was a very specific lifestyle that I knew I wasn't going to keep up forever. And eventually I just got really sick of having the same conversations with people. Where have you been? Where are you going? What do you do? And then these connections with people weren't very deep. Like I would maybe hang out with someone for a day. Maybe I'd travel with someone for a week if it worked out in that aspect. But there was just this lack of connection with people and with myself. Like I was running away from a lot of my own insecurities and just keeping myself really distracted with all the really cool things that were around me that were amazing, but I wasn't turning inward at all.
Isn't that so? Like I was just chatting with someone the other day. Like I'm very interested in how the voice in our head, some people call it the ego. I call it the sideliner because it's something that just keeps you. And it usually like gets very noisy when you're about to do something very big, but a lot of times it shows up and it sounds very reasonable. And yours seems to have like, you had all these things that are so interesting. Like even to think that somebody, as a woman traveling the world alone, like what kind of places would you go to? Like what's the like craziest place you went to?
Well, I was traveling mostly in Southeast Asia and Europe. The craziest place I probably went was Myanmar before all the political unrest was happening as there is right now. So I was just before, about a year or two before all of that was happening. And that was really cool. That was probably one of the most untouched places by tourism that I've been, but there was still tourism there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. That would be amazing. So you have everything like you're doing, and on paper it looks good, but I think that that's so interesting about the connections. I can totally see that, but also like how you set yourself up to be distracted. So at what point were you just, did you like, were you on a train, like in, I don't know, Vienna, and you're just like, holy smokes, I'm being so externally focused and not inwardly focused?
I had two really big moments. The first one was when I was sitting in a hostel in Northern Ireland and I was talking to a friend who was living in Bali. And I was like, that sounds really nice. Like to be somewhere that's not Canada, so it's really, but like to have like a base and to have people that I see every day, to have some sort of community. Right. So I ended up trying that out. But after a month of living in Bali, I was so like anxious. I was like, no, I got to keep moving. Like my comfort zone was continuing to move. It felt really uncomfortable just to be still. And the second big moment that I had was when I decided that I just needed to spend a week in one place. I was traveling around Europe at the time. So I decided to go to Madrid for a week, which was like unheard of for me. I was like, what the heck am I going to do for a whole week in one city? Like I can tick things off so fast, like all the must-dos, must-sees. And all I really wanted to do when I was there was just go and lay on a park bench and read. I didn't want to go to all the museums. I didn't want to see everything that's the must-see in Madrid. And I was like, this life of slowing down feels really good. I even went to a yoga class that I found for free that was offered in English in a park. And I was like, oh, this is so nice. This was before I was a yoga teacher or anything. And it just felt really good. And I was like, maybe I should be listening to how good this feels.
Oh my gosh. I love that you said that because I had this brain issue. We were talking a little bit about that in our before the show. And, you know, I'm in this online entrepreneurial space. So at the beginning of June, I knew I needed brain surgery, but I didn't end up having it until July 31st. So coordination of care, blah, 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 like that kind of stuff. And so all my online entrepreneur friends were like, oh my God, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to like launch something? Like everyone was sort of like, be heroic. And I was just like, how do they heal the brain? If you have a brain injury, they put you in a medically induced coma. And so I literally decided, and I felt like this was a radical move to what I called hashtag still life, but to literally make the decision to be still and to heal my brain. And I had a lot of support and mentors. Like I had a mentor who said, you know, you're just going to have to, because my energy was really, really different then too. So I would get, if I did anything, like go to the grocery store, like I would have to like recover from that. Like that was like my 80-year-old 4-year-old stepdad can walk faster than me. I was like, you've got to slow down. Like that's how bad it was. And so, but what's so interesting is that slowing down, the discomfort of the first like few weeks of that, it is a discomfort because you feel like, oh, I should be doing something, and doing nothing is actually doing something. Like that was what I just kept on telling myself. Like how they say like nothing is everything and everything is nothing. And like I sort of got that concept. And in that moment of stillness, that's like when you get those divine downloads and those like fun, because you're not distracted. Like you do get to slowing down. I really want to make sure I'm staying very true to that too, where I'm not going right back to my life. And this was just an experience I had and I slowed down to heal. But now that I'm healed, you know, that's so interesting that you also felt like that discomfort. But then once so a week in Madrid, laying on a park bench reading probably is a great reset button for that.
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. I had a great time. And then I picked up and started traveling quickly again. Like I needed to learn this lesson or have it like right in front of me so many times. And the funniest thing is that I ended up being back in Bali again. I would go to Bali for a couple months, then leave to travel for a couple, then go back to Bali. And I kind of had this little routine. And I had decided, you know what, I'm going to make a big commitment. I'm going to rent a room in a villa for 6 months. I got the room. I moved in. And 4 days later, I was on a plane flying home because our prime minister had said, Canadians, you should get back into the country now because COVID had hit. So it was March 20th. So I flew home.
You make like your big move, right? You're just like, I am doing this. And then the world was like, no, you are not. That exactly. Is like, we can laugh about that now, but like, there was like a lot of like, talk about uncertainty. So, and you're not even a yogi then. So how are you even coping with this?
So I was practicing yoga then already, and I had my yoga teacher training, but I had done my yoga teacher training in November of 2019. Okay. And then March 2020. Chaos went. Like I hadn't even fully decided that. Like I knew that I wanted to be a yoga teacher, but I wasn't really leaning into it yet. And then the world went nuts and I was kind of left with like, what am I supposed to do now? Like you said in the intro, like my income just like dried up so fast because who was looking at traveling during COVID? No one was booking flights or tours or looking at anything. And I made most of my money off of affiliates and ads at the time.
Oh my
God. So it was just gone.
So let's talk about this because you like, this is just like, I don't mean to laugh because it just, and the reason I think like laughing when things just seem absolutely so like apeshit crazy, like, so you lose your income like immediately. You're just like, I have a lot of professional speaking clients. So you're just like them, like immediately. I remember like I checked in with all of them and I'm just like, are you guys okay? And I remember like going to virtual, like, remember when people would just not even do like Zoom, like you might be on a Zoom, but not on video. Like, remember those days? So your income stopped, but you were able to somehow pivot into this new yoga and yoga mentorship line. And then you lost your income again. So tell me what happened. And then how did those experiences like shape your resilience and perspective on like, you know, staying positive or finding new opportunities? Because that's just like, that just seems just mean of the universe.
I was mad. Yeah. I was mad a lot during COVID. I did a lot of yoga. So I always say that I originally started yoga to help with my body. I originally started yoga wanting to lose weight. That's how a lot of people come. Yes. During COVID, I was doing yoga for my mental health because I was like, if I am not getting on the mat to practice something, I am going to go batshit crazy here.
Yes, so seriously.
It was very, very helpful for that because I ended up moving back home with my parents because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. And then my dad ended up moving to Europe. So I moved in with my mom who lived in a town of 2,000 people. Like I was so unhappy. I was the farthest away from being a full-time travel blogger that you could be. So I really did continue to try and push this travel blogging because it's what I knew. It's what I was comfortable with. No one asked to get a job just taken away.
But your like whole life is sort of shaping up to be like a Hallmark movie. First of all, it takes place in Canada. It's filmed in Canada. And then secondly, no, but just like, oh, world traveler blogger comes back to the 2,000 person small town. Like there wasn't like some like wildly good looking person that you were just like, okay, let's like, and they're just like city girl, you know, just that's so funny. Okay. So then you move home. So then you pivot. So you had at least I always like to have what I call like 2 feet on the ground. Like I just want to be able to have just steady footing in just so I can just sort of like evaluate all my options. So it sounds like you got that by living with your mom, but that must have been funny too. I loved it when my kids moved back in, you know, they were in their 20s and I thought this is really nice because you get a second shot at parenting. You know, and they'll do stuff like I could tell my son, like, hey, you should try to meditate. And he's like, okay. But if I said that to him in high school, he'd be like, you're so weird, you know? So it was like very cool. So was it cool? Like did you have Was it cool to live with your mom?
I'm close with my mom, so
Okay.
it was nice. And she lives in this beautiful 100-year-old farmhouse, which is
Oh,
very much her style, not mine. I can enjoy it, but it was too long that I was there.
yeah.
But I just had all of this time that I was like, you know what? Clearly no one's traveling right now. I could still try to build this and hope that COVID ends soon and people get back to traveling. But again, like I didn't know. So with all this time, I said, you know what? I really like yoga. Why don't I start writing about it? Even though I felt like an imposter at the time, which many people do after graduating from their 200-hour yoga teacher training.
Why is
Because
that?
there's just so much information to know in yoga that the way that we've set up modern training, yes, you can go and teach after your 200-hour yoga teacher training, but you are a forever student of yoga. Like
and
the
it's
tip
like
of
you
the
have to
iceberg.
learn how to say things like pada hastasana, stuff like that too. Like you, like I forget, like one of the simplest moves I think is like the wide leg, like fold over, like wide leg fold over thing. That has like the longest name. And I'm just like, because it's everything. It's like, because I know each one, it's like wide leg, bent over, straight leg. Like, I mean, I know that those are part of the positions, but I'm just like right there. And I told you I would already have like playlist paralysis. I would not be able to like I would just have like playlist phobia. Like I'd be so nervous my playlist is not good enough. That is so interesting. So tell me more about that imposter syndrome. Just because you would think like 200 hours, you'd be feeling so confident, but that's not really, you said, no, that's not really how it really works in the real world.
I think the biggest part of the imposter syndrome comes from the self-doubt as you're switching your identity. So I had this coming from a travel blogger to suddenly wanting to be a yoga teacher. I had to say like, okay, am I still the travel blogger? Am I now suddenly a yoga teacher? Do I have to be teaching yoga a certain way to be a yoga teacher? And there's all this like gray area in between of who am I? What am I actually doing?
Right.
What qualifies me to be this new role? And it's tough being a yoga teacher as well because you're really a leader. People think you know so much. People come up to me all the time after class asking me questions about like nutrition, or like someone was acting like I was a chiropractor and I was like, okay, whoa, listen. I am not qualified to answer these questions, but people really lean on their yoga teachers. And that can be really intimidating and definitely contribute to imposter syndrome as well.
I could see that because my yoga instructors are so healthy. Like I remember once I'm not proud of this, but after and I practice hot yoga, we went to Shake Shack for dinner, and guess who was there? My yoga instructor. And I was like, okay, good. Cause I was like, and I said, this never happened. And she's like, right, that never happened. But yeah, that you do. I always do think because they've come and they're so strong, and they're obviously the teachers, right? And they're telling us like, this is like, so I do feel like yoga instructors, like the branding of yoga to me implies health, not Shake Shack, like, so I could see where that would easily happen. That is so interesting. So you had to move out of this. And one of the things too, that I sort of struck me when you were talking about this, like, am I a travel blogger or am I a yoga instructor? Like I see this a lot of times with entrepreneurs is that they might have like a product or a service that works really well and they make like steady income from that. And then they have like their dream offer that they want to, and it's like, well, am I going to do this thing with her or am I going to do my dream offer? And we've created like this separation. And I'm like, why not just like be curious about like, wow, what would it be like if I did both? I told this guy and he was just like, that is like a huge, and I'm like, well, it's so funny. Like you're doing it in either or, like you have to. And I said, why not both? But it is so interesting, like how and I can see being a travel blogger is not the same as being a yoga instructor too. Like they're very far apart. So you decided I'm a yoga instructor. And so tell me then how you ended up tell me how you ended up overcoming those limiting beliefs to actually get in there and be the teacher, because now you teach new yoga instructors how to do this.
Yeah. So I kind of helped myself by pivoting in between to saying like, oh, I'm just a writer. Because I started writing about yoga before I really started teaching it seriously, because I was so familiar with writing already. And I was thinking, okay, how can I connect yoga more to travel? There are so many people in the world who love yoga who also love travel. Like they overlap a lot. And so I started writing about yoga retreats.
Yeah, nice.
And I was doing what I knew that I was already familiar with. Again, I was making money through affiliates doing that. And it was amazing. And I became really well known for that. I was ranking really high in Google's algorithm for a lot of those articles. And that's why I had some of my best years when I started writing about yoga. The universe was saying like, hey, this actually works for you. Go for it. And I also was like, okay, what do people actually want right now? Oh, online yoga teacher training is really starting to blow up because it's the only way that people can take their training right now. And that has put me in touch with now people that I work with and I teach and I coach in their programs as well. And it opened up all these doors years ahead that I didn't even think of it being a direction that I wanted to go in. So all these little things, all these little steps that I took, just saying like, oh, I'm going to take a tentative step forward and see what happens. Like I said, it's years later now that I'm like, oh my God, look at all of these things and how they worked out. I never, ever would have foreseen this.
And I think that just like a little marketing, there's a little like really good marketing nugget in here too, that when you really know your audience and you have like good and dynamic content and you're producing new and relevant content all the time, Google rewards that. Like the things that have never changed, like SEO strategy is something I don't do it, but I've been, in marketing, I manage websites and things like that. And we've been doing this since the early 2000s. And the one thing that has not changed ever is relevant content and engagement. Like those are the two things that still are, content is always going to be king too. So I love that. So as a yoga teacher and mentor now, you inspire others to sort of chase their dreams. So, and I love it when people are really like, they were in it and they felt something that that's completely relatable, right? You said imposter syndrome. And then you're like, well, I'm going to do something about this. And I'm now going to create this supportive space for people to help them do that. So what advice would you give to someone who maybe is wanting to let go? Maybe they're not feeling their dream job is that dreamy, or they want to let go of something that's not really working for them and take a step forward to something new. So you said like you did it with writing, but I feel like you said something like, I knew I liked to write and I knew I liked yoga. So what if I wrote about yoga? So there was maybe before you answer that question, I want to go back to how did you start to turn your focus inward? And what was that like? Because you talked about traveling and how you were so externally stimulated. You thought a week in Madrid, you're like, I could see everything I need to see in like 2 days in Madrid. Like speed touring, right? So how did that shift happen? And was it in the yoga studio that you started to become more internally focused?
Not necessarily in the studio because I was practicing yoga more so at home, but it's all about listening to and getting curious of like the little nuggets of curiosity. So why am I interested in this? Why do I feel like I need to do this yoga practice today? Why am I drawn to this person? Why do I suddenly want to write about this? And I just followed those nuggets and they eventually acted like stepping stones leading me to where I am. Because I think as long as we're following our curiosity.
Such a beautiful analogy. Like I feel like I see you like hopping across a stream and then on the other side is like this beautiful utopia, yeah, that's a gorgeous analogy because it is like, I would have like my students on, cause I have these online masterminds and like some of my students will say like, oh, this is just a baby step. And I'm like, a step is a step. It does not matter. A step is a step. I'm like, don't minimize any action forward that you're taking because the tiniest things can lead. Remember that game? I don't know. I know I'm a lot older than you, but there was this game called Don't Spill the Beans. And you would there was like this little lever and you would put the beans on this plate, take turns. And if you spilled the beans, you lost. But it was just a game of like balance. And that's what it's like. Just sometimes that tiny little move ended up leading to something that you just had absolutely no idea was even going to exist. And now you think about how you teach yoga, you train people in yoga, and then talk to me about how you help people after they get their certification. Because I am just so fast. The secret lives of yoga instructors. Seriously. I'm going to have this whole new appreciation for my instructors.
So even like way back, closer to when I did my training, I had a get of like, I knew that I would eventually want to one day work with instructors. I love being a teacher. So I love teaching students, but I also love teaching teachers. So I always had that in the back of my mind, but I knew that I needed to go out and actually be a teacher first. I would never teach from not having any experience whatsoever.
Right.
And I started to realize that what was drawing people the most to me, what people were really interested in hearing from me, were the things that made me different, were the things that actually made me insecure, and things that I had to take the time to deal with. Because during COVID, I really dived into a lot of insecurities I had around my body image. I am not your average looking yoga teacher. Unfortunately, in yoga, there's a very specific body type that tends to be pushed forward, but I'm a larger girl. And I have students come up to me all the time and say that they're so happy to see someone who looks more like them, or just someone who looks different. And that can be the same for anyone who has different colored skin. Like as long as you look different in some way, you can create connection with people like that.
Oh, and I love that. Wait, I just got goosebumps up here. Like, so that means that's good. Like, I love that. I'm from Ohio, and I'm from like this, Toledo, Ohio. And there's actually a Bikram studio in Toledo. And so it's my savior when I go to visit my family, just because I can keep up with my practice. And the person who started that studio, his first class, he weighed 450 pounds. But there's something about like Bikram yoga that like, it just sometimes really clicks with me. Like it was with me, like it just really clicked with me that I was like, this is going to become my practice. And it has really been my practice for like I've been practicing yoga for like 9 years. So it's been my practice really for like the last 7. But what's so cool about his studio, so now you look at him and he's like trim, but he's lost so much weight. Like he had to have like that skin removal surgery. But I think because of his background, because he was this very large person, and then he was like, he was like, it wasn't even like necessarily being on the mat or the sweating. It was more the breath work that really was so powerful for him. But I love going to that studio because it is all shapes and sizes, all ages, it is literally like the United Nations of yoga. And I love going to that studio because it definitely has that vibe. And I think that that's a very cool thing. And yoga means like community, right? Isn't that like the word yoga means community or unity?
Yeah.
Right.
To yoke, union. Yeah.
Oh my God. Amazing. Yeah. So that's so cool. So I love that. All right. Continue. So you help people continue. Sorry.
So I would have people who would come up to me and would make all these comments, and I'm realizing, I was like, oh, these people actually like me or are curious about what I have to say and what I have to teach. And my energy is different because of the experiences that I have been through. Even though they were painful and hard to get through at the time, I'm still, for lack of a better way to say it, a step ahead of where these students maybe actually want to be. Maybe they want to feel more comfortable in their body. So a lot of my theming, a lot of the cues that I give are really about grounding, because I'm someone who tends to overthink, and a lot of people relate to that. So grounding, really connecting with the earth, really helps a lot of people. I have a lot of themes of self-acceptance in my classes, saying like, maybe you try your posture this way today. Maybe you do it a little bit differently than you did last week. And people are interested in that because it helps them have an experience that they can really feel. That's what is yoga beyond the poses. And I don't think that students necessarily notice this. They just know that they feel good. But as a teacher, when I'm talking to new yoga teachers who don't know what to do or where to go, or think that they need to know more or take another certification, I always tell them, no, you just need to look at what makes you different. What bothered you and is something that you grew through. Add that to your classes, and there are 100% going to be people who relate.
Well, of course, my marketing heart is just like, yes, it's like pumping, like, yes, yes, yes. Because we all know in marketing that it's not about being the best. It is about being different, because there's always going to be someone who's as good or better than, like, that's just how the world works, right? But so it's like, how does somebody little compete against someone big? It's because you really start to carve out, this is how I'm different and people need to hear this. And I love, especially in an industry like yoga, where there is sort of that yoga. I know exactly what you mean, that yoga body type. I remember like being in a yoga class where I would spend a lot of time comparing my body against other people's body in the class. And I mean, I'm in my 50s. So I remember I was comparing myself to probably a young woman who was my daughter's age, like in her 20s. And I was just like, oh, what am I even doing? Like, I don't know. I had like one of those epiphanies in classes that I was like, don't even, like, why am I even comparing myself? Like, number one. But then the people I choose to compare myself with, they're like, not even, it's unfair to both of us for me to compare myself to her, like to say, oh, I should. That'd be like, oh, so a friend of mine just sent a picture of me and it was from 17 years ago. And I was just looking at it and I was holding it up to the mirror and I'm just like, yes, of course you're going to look different 17 years later, So I love that there's such this not contrived, but this sort of accepted thing about yoga as being like skinny with like this much thigh gap, and that you're going to be super good. So I like the all shapes and sizes too. So then the people who you work with typically, like who is just your ideal person that you love to work with? Like what's going on in their head that you're like?
Someone who is either fresh or maybe a year or two out of taking their 200-hour yoga teacher training, or maybe they've gone on and they've taken more advanced yoga teacher trainings and they still feel like they don't know enough. The problem with this is we think that education means that we'll be better teachers. I know tons of teachers who are also really famous who have only taken 200 hours of training.
Right.
All of this needs to be fully embodied. And this is where I start to teach more somatic type yoga. This is where the coaching and the mentorship really comes in handy, because I'm there not just as your cheerleader and to help give you pep talks, but to help you realize that you already know this information and you just need to tap into what you already know and let it out. Because honestly, it gets more confusing the more information that you know.
I would imagine, especially if you're trying to like load up on all the knowledge before you actually have the practical application of what you've learned already. Right. Yeah. It's sort of like my one sister and I have a big family. I have 4 sisters and 4 brothers, but my one sister was getting married and my one other sister and I were watching Martha Stewart make a wedding cake when Martha Stewart had her TV show. And we were both like, we can totally make Michelle's wedding cake. I don't even know what we were thinking. And it's just like uninformed. It was like uninformed optimism, right? Like thinking that we would be able to like make a cake like Martha Stewart and that it would look like a Martha Stewart cake our first time out of the gate, highly unlikely, right? But with lots of practice, she's showing us how to do something that she makes it look effortless because she's been doing it for like 35 years. But she empowers and inspires us to think that we can do it. But sometimes like you have to have the practical application of it. Like you're not going to become a good teacher by learning more things to teach. You're going to become a good teacher by actually teaching and finding out what works for you too, right? Like, and that's sort of embodying.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you say like people know this inside, because I know like we talk about inner work and we throw like, I watch a lot of TikToks like, oh, do your inner work. And I know what it feels like when you have those shifts or that release of like a negative belief. Like I know what it feels like for me, but is there sort of like a universal way that, I don't know what I'm trying to ask. Like, what does it feel like? How do you identify if you have some inner work to do? Like you said something really interesting where you were like, I want to teach them sort of that structure that you already know this inside. Like you have this internal wisdom already. How do you know? How do you tap into that source? Is there like a good starting point? Is it somatics? Is it breath work? Is it Kundalini? Because you said you've been getting into Kundalini too. Like,
yes. So,
oh my God, your face totally lit up when I said the K word. You were just like,
So a lot of people get stuck in the intellectual. And this is where I was at for a really long time too. We think that we read a book and we're like, we know it. Knowing and embodying are two completely different. Embodying is when you know things like within your body. It's kind of hard to explain. You feel more confident when you're delivering information. So sometimes you read a book, let's say like the Yoga Sutras, which are basically like the Bible of yoga.
Yes.
And you think that you know the Yoga Sutras, but someone asks you about the Yoga Sutras and you try to explain it and you're stumbling all over it. This is when you think that you intellectually know something. When you embody something, you're really able to explain. You're really able to teach from this place. It's something that like the cells in your body actually know. And this is what teaching from experience really is. Embody, somatic is just like the more like fancy, trendy word right now that we're using.
Right. I really like that. Like, it sort of reminds me of like, I don't know, like when you're teaching your kids, like how to cook with you or something, right? Like, you give them the practice and you're there to sort of guide them. And then ultimately the idea is that they're going to be able to cook for themselves when they're adults, right? So I think that proverb is like, you're teaching them how to fish as well. But you're saying that you have to have that practical experience. So that's like, I sort of say in marketing, you can take 1,000 classes and be completely in tune to all but marketing until you actually take action on it is simply a concept. I guess almost anything would be like that. Yoga too would be like that same thing. Teaching is just a concept until you teach.
Absolutely. And I think when we talk about embodying and really knowing things deeper than an intellectual level, it's when it's really merging with your energy as well. Like you made a comment already when I hopped on this call with you, like, oh, I love your energy. You could feel that. You could tell that I like knew and I was confident about what I am talking about. And this is a big thing that I help new yoga teachers discover as well, is when you're shifting your identity, you got to really start pulling this into your energy and really sharing your energy with the world. And that's what's making yoga classes so much of an experience for people. This is where the impact come from, not from delivering your sequence perfectly and not making mistakes and having a really fun like flow to go through, but you just being in the room with those people is what's making the biggest difference. And that is embodying.
That is the absolute truth, because I have like 4 main instructors and they all have a completely different vibe, and their classes, like when you go into them, you know exactly what you're going to get. And each one, like, and I practice the same 26 postures, right? And there's like a very scripted sequence and that kind of stuff. So there's not a lot of improvisation. So it is that all that energy and just that love and support, like that you just can't, if anyone's on the fence about doing yoga, I just have to say, do yoga. It is absolutely the best thing for your body. I just had to do all this genetic testing, and I had to have a spine MRI. And when I saw my spine is so healthy. Like I told my spine doctor, I was like, my spinologist, I was like, if you want to use that in a presentation, this is a healthy spine of like a 59-year-old woman. You totally can do that and I know that's because of my yoga practice. It's like a thick, like, when you get a milkshake and they give you one of those thick straws, that was like my spinal column. I was like, it's just the best. And I think what's interesting too, is it's like, obviously you get stronger and I just can tell, like I move differently, but I really love, the breath. Like I realize, like I've learned how to breathe in this world thanks to yoga, especially when I'm working. My sister's visiting me and she's working, and it's so interesting when you hear someone else like how often we hold our breath when we're working. And so I just feel like I'm a much better breather. Not that I never hold my breath, but I feel like I catch myself and I'm like, you're not even breathing, or you're only breathing like this part of your lungs. You're not doing a full deep breath, which changes your physiology immediately too. It's beyond thought or meditation. It's like things that happen. The body's incredible. What's the one thing you've learned about yourself or your body or just the human body as part of your yoga practice that you're just like, God damn, our bodies are amazing?
Oh my gosh, so many things. I think like a really big, not I think, I know a really big light bulb moment for me in my self-acceptance journey with my body was when I did yoga teacher training and I realized that I have like short arms compared to the rest of my body. And I was like, this is why arm balances really are that much more challenging for me because I just don't have the extra length or the normal length that like a lot of people have. So that to me was just really, really interesting and really cool to recognize just how different all of our bodies can be.
Yes. And that's so interesting, like the length of your arms too. Cause I feel like I'm not a very tall person, but everyone else in my family is tall. So like I'm a short person, but I'm built to be tall. So people oftentimes think I'm taller than I am because I try to project 5'7", but I'm really only 5'3". But I'm like, I have big hands and big feet and everything. Like I was meant to be tall, but I don't know why I just stopped at 5'3". But that's so interesting. I think too, one of the things I love about being back on my mat after, my last yoga class was on May 8th. And then I didn't come back until after, like, I think I tried to come back after my brain surgery, like 1 week later. And I was just like, that was really soon. Like that was very soon to go back, but I was really determined because we had tickets to go see Pearl Jam in Montana. And I was really determined to really get my walking back in place because going to a concert on crutches is the absolute worst. Like it's just not as much fun. It's definitely more fun to go to a concert without crutches. But I was using like props and implements like when I was sort of becoming disabled because of my brain issue. And then as I've been healing, I remember thinking like, no, I shouldn't be using props or anything. I should be using my own body and starting to build that own strength within me. And then I was like, that's crazy. Like, why would I like cut myself off from these tools and implements when I'm trying to rebuild? And that was like a huge epiphany because my style of practice too, like you're not supposed to use props, I guess, like in my style of yoga. But I was like, I don't care. I'm obviously going to use them. But you were like, I love props. So can you talk to me more about like just how props work and how they're so helpful and why we should be using more props?
Yeah, like I told you earlier, props are my best friends. I love them. I always have them. If you're going to start with just one prop, have 2 blocks. Those are the easiest ones to adjust and to use for different things. My ultimate favorite is a bolster, which is like a long circular or like rectangular cushion. And those are really good for yin yoga practices, which is a style I'm very, very passionate about. You hold poses for about 3 to 5 minutes. It really gives you the opportunity to slow down and get still, which is what makes the practice so challenging for the majority of people.
I love that practice. And I just think like I'm going to Nosara, Costa Rica in a couple of weeks. So lots of yoga. And I just love to practice yin yoga down there because you just stretch. And that's too like about breathing, like just getting that breath, sitting through that meditative aspect of it. I just think like your hips, like I just cannot wait you make me want to do pigeon right now. Like just do some hip openers right now. So Taylor, if people want to work with you or they want to get yoga certified with you or they're a yoga instructor and they're totally feeling the imposter syndrome and they want to work with you as a coach, how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I don't certify teachers, but I do work with teachers. So I just want to point that out. I don't do yoga teacher training. I'm a guest expert in other people's training. So you may see me pop in and out depending where you do training. But yeah, if you'd like to work with me, if you have any questions, my 4-month program, Sacred Exploration, is specific for yoga teachers who have a passion and just are craving sharing it with the world, but their self-doubt is holding them stuck where they are.
Oh my God, Sacred Exploration.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, like you just gave me goosebumps again. I love that. Well, I love a program name. So this is what I love about a good program name is if you walked into a room and there was only a big table and the only thing on it was a piece of paper with that name, you would have, even if you didn't know anything about your program, you would have sort of an understanding of what was going to happen in it. And you would think that there's going to be something like spiritual or something yoga-y or something about that, like the sacred part. And then the exploration, obviously clear. So I love that name. It is gorgeous. I bet that came to you at a time of stillness. I get all my
Yes.
program names
Yes.
during stillness. Yeah, totally. Like, I'm just like, okay, I got to see if that's available. Go to GoDaddy.com. That's incredible. So then, I'm sorry. So what is your website or your social handles or both?
Everything is Taylor's Tracks. Taylor's with an S and Tracks spelled Tracks on Instagram, my website, everything.
Taylor Tracks. Alrighty. Taylor Lorenz, thank you so much for being on Curveball. I've never been so excited to get back to my yoga mat. Like I am feeling like I wish I might have to do a couple of salutations right after we get off this call. Thank you so much for being on Curveball. It was so fun to talk to you.
Thank you. I loved this conversation. It was a pleasure.